Hey, and welcome here to this short introduction to the Raspberry Pi and how we are going to be working with it here at Business Academy Aarhus. We use the Raspberry Pi for a vital tool to learn IT competencies and embedded technologies, network technologies, and so on. And in the end, we are going to be using it as a technology for projects. So it's kind of important that you have a hand-on experience with this tool, and since we are in a lockdown situation, you're not able to come to the school and work on the physical machines at the school, but as you know, we are fortunate that we have one day where you can come and set up and get to know the little machine and working on it before going home and using it for future lectures, online lectures. So a lot of the things that you normally would work and try and arrow and troubleshoot at the school, you'll have to do at home. So therefore we have to be how do you say, we need to set up some equipment the first day, and then hopefully you can troubleshoot it yourself. And therefore also these couple of videos here. The first one, we're going to introduce the Raspberry Pi, look at it. I know some of you will know it, and some of you it's the first time seeing this little machine. But in this first video here, we will have focus on how to install the operating system in case it fails at home, and we'll look at some of the measures that we have and how to do it. We'll also try this first here. We will do if you have access to a keyboard and so on and a monitor. But we'll also look at it if you don't have a keyboard and a monitor, and how we can set it up from a computer, from a laptop. There is just a requirement of Ethernet connection, but let's get on with it and let's see the little device. So I have it here in front of me. It's the Raspberry Pi 3. My guess is that you'll get a Raspberry Pi 4. But I have some power here, a USB power. On the 4, it's going to be a USB-C. This is a micro USB. A little SD card. This is where the operating system is going. This is your hard disk. And a HDMI cable. Here on the 3, it's a full HDMI. But on the Raspberry Pi 4, it's a micro HDMI. But we will provide you with cables and so on. And then a little Ethernet connection as well, Ethernet cable. So what we will do is, let me see, we will try and have our little Raspberry Pi here, and we'll connect it with some power, and we'll connect it with a HDMI cable if you have a monitor for it, an external monitor. And then we'll connect a keyboard, and we will have this little SD card here with the operating system on. So our first goal is to get our operating system on the Raspberry Pi. So let's try and see if we can do that. First, head over to raspberrypi.org, the official webpage for the Raspberry Pi, and then you need to go into we need to go into software. And as you can see, we have this. We can choose to download a Raspberry Pi Imager, a tool that we use to flash the operating system. I can choose to download it for Windows, Mac OS, or Ubuntu. So we should be quite covered here. So I have already downloaded it. So let's try and see if we can use it. So when we open it, it looks a bit like this. and I will plug in my SD card in my little reader here. And a good thing if you do this from the beginning is to erase and remember to choose the right card if you have other things connected. So I'll erase my little SD card before writing a new operating system to it. It should not take long. And then I need to go into Raspberry Pi other OSs, and I need to find the OS Lite. It is so that we are going to be using the Raspberry Pi Lite version in the lectures and without any graphic user interface, so we don't need any extra cooling and so on. Later on, when you get on your own, you're more than welcome to install another operating system, but here on first semester we'll be using the operating system OS Lite here. Again, choosing my SD card and then writing everything onto the disk. So it should take a little bit of time, so let's speed up the process. Yeah, and when it's done, a good thing is to verify that the correct operating system and so on, verifying the partition that we just made. So let's keep doing this verifying here. It takes way less time than writing it. Yes, and our SD card is now ready, and we can remove it. It is ejected. So let's try and see how that looks. So I want to plug in my SD card here. Let's first take a closer look at the Raspberry Pi. Again, it's a Raspberry Pi 3 this here, but let's take a look at it. So what we were discussing was that we have an HDMI cable here, the Ethernet connections, a couple of USBs. We have the GPIOs, the pins that you will be using for the embedded is those up here. We have the CPU here. We have a couple of other connectors for screen and camera and so on. And up here we have the little power connection and a jack cable for audio and so on. But if we turn it around on the back here, we can see a little place for our SD card. So let's mount the SD card inside the connector, and let's get it connected. And remember not to turn on the power before everything is connected. So now I'm only missing a keyboard, and then we can get it connected to a keyboard as well. So let's get the USB connected to the keyboard. So let's get rid of this. So now my little Raspberry Pi should be ready to get running for the first time. So let's try and see how that looks, and let's turn on the power. And if you are connected to a monitor, you should see something like this appearing here, and the Raspberry Pi begins booting up. And it will reboot a couple of times, so it's very important that you do not disconnect power while it is booting, otherwise you could damage the SD card and you'll have to buy a new one yourself. Luckily it's not very cheap, very expensive. It's you can get the SD card very cheap these days, but we need to let it run this boot process So let's see how it goes. So your Raspberry Pi is now connected and ready to log into. As you can see, it is still running some commands, but if I hit enter here, and the default username is Pi, and the password is Raspberry. So now I can see that I'm connected to my Raspberry Pi, and this again, if you have access to an HDMI monitor and you have an external keyboard, wired keyboard or wireless keyboard that you can plug in. And some of the commands that we are going to be going over in class is setting up these commands here, rasp, let me see, -config. And in here, we're going to be setting up some of the vital information like network, and we're going to be setting up input from commands as well. So it's fairly easy to get up and running with your Raspberry Pi in case you have access to a HDMI monitor and a keyboard. It's a little bit more tricky if you do not have access to this, and this is what we're going to be looking at in the next video. So hopefully you're ready to go from here.